The fastest 3 hours in radio. You're with Brian Kilmeade.
I think it is important to recognize that we have a very divided country, as you well know. You have said that polls really don't reflect where people are. I agree with you. But I will tell you, this is the first time, Jen, that I have felt like the 2024 election is in great trouble for the president and for our Democratic control, which is essential to moving forward. Because these young people, Muslim Americans, Arab Americans, but also young people, see this conflict as a moral conflict and a moral crisis. And they are not going to be brought back to the table easily with, if we do not address this.
That is Congresswoman Jayapal, who's speaking for young people, Tlaib. It sounds like Jayapal, wasn't it? Tlaib, okay. She is not, she is out of her mind, and she's taking on President of the United States, who, according to reports, is a Democrat. And they're worried about young people. The young people didn't even know weren't even thinking about Palestinians until after the Palestinians, led by Hamas, massacred the Israeli settlers, 790 which were civilians, some of which were elderly, and they took 244 hostages. Congressman Byron Donalds. Congressman, they're not talking about the Republicans being divided. They're talking about Democrats being divided, and aptly so. Can you try to characterize how divided that caucus is right now?
Well, first, it's good to be with you, Brian. I'll tell you, we know they're very divided because typically the Democrats just vote in lockstep, and it's very hard to break them. But when Speaker Johnson put up an Israeli funding package that also used IRS dollars to fund what is needed for Israel, you had 12 Democrats broke ranks with their party to vote for that package. Because for them, they understand that helping our ally Israel is the thing that matters more than anything else. It's significantly more important than giving the IRS new money to hire agents to go after the middle class of our country. And so they decided to break ranks with their party and to take our side. And I think the real undercurrent is this wave of anti-Semitism in the Democrat Party. And it's very clear. There are a lot of internal conflicts in their party right now. But our job is not to worry about party politics. Our job is to support Israel, make sure they have everything that they need. And in what's going on in our country, it needs to be very clear that our nation has to be supportive of our ally. And that needs to be the message coming from the White House continuously and from both parties in Congress.
But, the thing is, too, they got to be able to pursue this to the end. Here's Michael Herzog. They're trying to avoid all civilian casualties, but they have to wipe out Hamas. Cut 3.
We are making every effort to distinguish between terrorists and civilian population. We call on civilian population to move to the south out of harm's way. And Hamas is doing everything they can to keep them in harm's way. Most of the population moved to the south. And as we speak, and we are pressing Hamas in the north, we are calling people to move out of harm's way. Mm-hmm. I would be very careful about judging those numbers because neither you nor I know how many of them are armed terrorists and how many of them are civilians. I don't know, and you don't know.
Israeli ambassador to the U.S., and that's what the challenges he's getting from the American press, as if they're the bad guys. Why? How could they be losing a PR war to a group of people that target civilians as opposed to the ones that call it collateral damage because they're aiming for the terrorists? How are they losing that messaging war?
Because the American press is very liberal, and that's something that we all know. Let's call it exactly what it is. They have a preferred worldview, which is really aligned with this White House and some of the radicals in this White House. I mean, just turn on some of the channels. But what Herzog is saying is 100% correct. First of all, this whole conflict is because of Hamas and the tragedy they unleashed on Israel on October 7th. But also, let's be also clear on this one. Hamas embeds themselves amongst civilians. which is a violation of the rules of war. They put some of their arsenal, their batteries, they put that within civilian populations, a violation of the rules of war. And then they want to go to the world and say, oh, we want a ceasefire, we want a ceasefire. You're not allowed to hide behind civilians. You're not allowed to hide behind women and children. And so it puts Israel in a tremendously difficult spot because Hamas must be obliterated. So they're going to do what they need to do. We're going to support them in everything that they need to do. But the press here in America needs to understand that the actions of Hamas are detestable. And you can't go down this line of wanting a ceasefire when they purposefully create human shields with the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip so that they can remain in power and then bring more terror in the future. We got away from this way of waging war in the past, and they want to bring it back. And so the true consequence of that is that there are civilian casualties, but that is because of Hamas, nobody else.
So there's been 32 attacks on our guys since October and women since October 7th. And yet the president's answered like one time but on a Syrian depot and keeps saying we do not want war with Iran. Congressman, nobody wants a world war. But isn't the best way to avoid that to show massive strength? How many unanswered calls are we going to tolerate?
Well, here's the first thing. Who even talks like this publicly? What our enemies need to understand is you have to fear us. So if our men and women are attacked, we need to respond in kind. Period, full stop. If anybody needs to be talking about how they don't want war, let that be the Iranians. Let that be the mullahs over there. It shouldn't be our stance. Listen, I believe in peace through strength. That has been the basis of American foreign policy for decades, and it has worked. It's led to a safer world. But when you have a president who leads with appeasement, which is frankly not leading at all, it only emboldens our adversaries. And if you don't take decisive action when our men and women are targeted, it's only going to invite more bloodshed in the future. This stuff is not that hard if you study history and you look at conflicts over the course of time. But we have a radical president. Mm-hmm. We have radical staff surrounding this president who have a view of the world that is not reality, and it's leading to the deaths of people.
So when we talk to you, you live in politics. I'm in and out of it with the news, and everybody looks at Joe Biden, sees how he struggles with the spoken word, and sees his stance on things, and sees his one-word answers which defy the stated policy, and they say Barack Obama's running this place. And then we get word for the last few months, 6 months, Barack Obama's been heading up the AI policy board, working with the White House and the higher-ups in the Biden administration on an AI policy. At the same time, they told the vice president she was doing it, and she went to UK with their white paper on this. So what's going on? And if you want to ask a former president to help, since when is that a secret? George W. Bush asked Bill Clinton and his dad to help out all the time. Past presidents always, Jimmy Carter constantly asked to help out. Richard Nixon all the time. What's with the secrecy?
Well, a couple things. One, we know Joe Biden's not in charge. Let's just be very honest about this. The man is not, he's not what he used to be 3 years ago. Everybody knows this, including our adversaries. He's not in charge. You have the Obama B and C team that are basically running this White House. The fact that they are kind of hiding the former president with respect to his role speaks volumes, because it kind of lends credence to what a lot of people have been believing for a long time, that Obama is really running this White House through the back door. Look, that being said, the key thing is there is no leadership out of this White House. There's no leadership from Kamala Harris. There's no leadership from Joe Biden. And so that's how you have a situation where we have basically had to evacuate 6 embassies in 3 years overseas. This is how you get a situation where we leave $85 billion in military equipment. It's how you get a situation where our southern border is completely exposed, so much so that even now Democrat mayors are upset about it. And this is how you have a situation where our economy is a mess and inflation is still too high. There is no leadership. And so there's time for a change. And for the people who say, oh, they're going to get rid of Joe Biden and put somebody else on the ballot, let me be very clear. replace the Democrat won't matter. The policies are the same. It's a disaster for America, not just here, but also abroad.
Well, Congressman Byron Donalds, our guest. Congressman, a couple of things. You know, with Speaker Johnson, you guys passed, says $14 billion out of IRS. The Senate's going to say no, $110 billion, and we're not going to take anything from the IRS. I know what you want. Can you tell us what we're going to get?
I think it is shameful that the United States Senate cannot support our greatest ally in the region because they want to pay for new IRS agents. That is shameful, and it's disgraceful. We are $33 trillion in debt. We're running a $2 trillion deficit. You just can't keep borrowing money, even in emergency situations. You got to pay for this stuff. And so, yeah, we are going to change the way Washington works. And so for the senators to say it's dead on arrival because you're saying that the real priority for our country is supporting Israel, not IRS agents who are going after the middle class in our country, that's disgraceful. They should be ashamed of themselves. The House's position, I'm not speaking for Speaker Johnson in this one, I'm going to speak for myself. If I have anything to do about it, the House position will not change. We are going to fund Israel. We are going to do it with this money for the IRS agents, which, frankly, we don't need, Brian, because we're raising record revenue into the federal government treasury right now. So we don't need new agents. We need to support our ally in Israel, and I'll have that battle with anybody on the Senate. Send Chuck Schumer, send Mitch McConnell. The answer will be the same.
So what if they ask for a pledge to take Ukraine and border separately after? Would you guys give that?
I'm not pledging anything with the Senate. First of all, the Senate hasn't done any work. What work has the Senate done in the last 10 months? Nothing. When we were in the middle of looking for a Speaker of the House, did the Senate pass appropriation bills? No, they did not. Did the Senate pass any bills associated with a supplemental? No, they did not. The only game the Senate is playing is basically trying to wait out the House so they can jam us with fiscally irresponsible measures, which is the modus operandi of the United States Senate. I'm not interested in that game anymore.
Which is
crazy. We're going to take care of Israel. They need to do that first.
Because it's crazy because the Republicans had the most favorable map in 20 years to take back the Senate. So why wouldn't they make the most of their last few months? Congressman, a couple of things. How disappointed, if at all, were you that you did not get the votes to be Speaker?
It wasn't about disappointment. It really wasn't. It was about making sure that we could get back to work. I'm really proud and happy that Mike Johnson is our Speaker. I've got a chance to work with Mike. He is a man of great character. By that point, after we had been through, obviously, Kevin McCarthy, Steve Scalise, Jim Jordan, and Tom Emmer, at that point it was like, listen, Mike, if it's you, great. If it's me, great. But we got to get back to work. So I'm very happy for him. It's not an issue for me. I just want to make sure that we're doing everything possible to get this country on track. And if there's going to be leadership anywhere in Washington, D.C., it has to come from House Republicans because the Senate has done nothing, and we already have talked about the White House.
Okay, I don't want to be sad, Congressman, so make sure we continue to lead. Congressman Byron Donalds, thanks so much.
Anytime. Thanks, Brian.
You got it. 1-866-408-7669. Back to wrap things up and wrap up this hour. Brian Kilmeade Show.
It's Brian Kilmeade. The talk show that's getting you talking. You're with Brian Kilmeade.